What you're going to do is go recording over it.
Hi, I'm John. Susan Joyce.
Adam Franklin.
Kristen Collins.
Where you were, what you did. Okay?
Norbert Ketzer.
And hear all of it.
Okay. How about starting with, were you drafted or did you enlist?
You'll have to talk up there because I have a
Okay.
hearing problem.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted.
What were your reasons behind it?
You'll have to talk up.
What were some of your reasons behind enlisting in the Navy?
Well, at the time the draft was instituted, and if I enlisted, I could pick the choice of my service, and that's why I did that.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Buffalo at the time, in North Buffalo.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Pardon me?
Do you recall your first days in service?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Do you recall your first days in service?
I'm sorry, I just can't hear you.
Do you recall the first days of your service?
Oh, the first days of my service? Yes, reluctantly. They were sort of strange to a young fellow. I think the hardest part was being away from home, things you were used to.
And why did you pick the branch that you picked?
Why did I pick the what?
The branch of the service that you picked?
I enlisted before World War II, and never realizing the war would start, I figured that would be a good way to get around and see the world, see some of the things I would not have been able to do. But surprisingly enough, World War II started, and that was a different ball game from there on in.
How hard was it for you to leave your family?
It was hard. We were a very close-knit family. Back in those days, nobody had much money, and we didn't get around too much, so this was a new experience entirely. And I'd never been away from my family before that, so it was hard.
Can you describe some of your experiences in basic training, like the first days of going into the service?
Well, I think the best way to explain that is that the basic training was probably the hardest part of my Marine Corps time. Even combat wasn't as bad as basic training in the Marine Corps, because the discipline is so rigid, and for a young fellow to get in there and have somebody to tell him what to do every minute of the day, it was kind of strange.
Do you remember any of your instructions?
Do I remember my instructors? I most certainly do. I thought they were the most miserable people on earth at the time. They were old Nicaraguan Marines. By that I mean they were in the Marine Corps from 1927 on. And they were just mean characters, but they knew their business, and they really whipped us into shape. I don't have any ill feelings toward them now.
What was your job or assignment when you were in service?
What was what?
Your job?
My job in the Corps? Well, I became engineering section chief for a dive bombing squadron. And that entailed servicing aircraft and having a crew work under me to do that.
And where exactly were you stationed?
Pardon me?
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed in so many places, it's hard to... In what time were you particularly referring to?
Where did you start off?
Oh, I started out at Parris Island, South Carolina. That's the Marine Corps boot camp. And then I went to Marine Barracks at Quantico, Virginia. And from there I went to school in Jacksonville, Florida, Naval Machinist Mate School. And from there I was transferred to North Island, San Diego. And from there, Santa Barbara Marine Air Station. And from there, the Hawaiian Islands. And from there, just so many islands that we went to, it's hard for me to remember, except the combat areas.
What were some of the positive aspects of joining?
How did you keep entertained?
How did I keep entertained? Well, unlike being in Europe or someplace where there were civilian population, where we were, there were no civilians. There were islands and there was fighting going on. And we just kept entertained by doing our job. I mean, we were busy day and night. Once in a while we'd get a few beers and that would help. But there wasn't much entertainment. It was mostly camaraderie with your fellow group.
Can you tell us what a day would consist of at basic training? Like, from the time you woke up?
In basic training?
Yeah.
Well, I think Reveille was probably around 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd fall out for roll call. And we'd go to breakfast. And from there on, it was drilling. Drill, drill, drill. We didn't know what the drilling was about, but it was strictly a discipline routine. You had to fall in, you had to do certain marching techniques. Strictly discipline up until the time that we started to learn about weapons and things like that. But I think you can talk to any of these veterans and they'll tell you their boot camp training was probably the worst part of their career. From then on in, why, after you were accepted by your fellows, it wasn't all that bad.
What was the food like here? What was the food like?
What was what there?
The food.
The food was very good in the States. Very good.
What did you eat?
We ate basically the same things we had at home. I never threw a chow line. We were always served at a table with dishes. It was like eating in a restaurant. It was not bad at all. I don't know about the other branches of service, but our food was great and service was great. Although we had to do a little KP duty once in a while. That wasn't much fun. Kitchen police, that is. But I'd say all in all, the food was very, very good.
One of the other vets told us that they had to run a 50-mile run, and that was one of the hardest tasks that they had to perform. What would you consider that one of the hardest drills or tasks that you had to do?
The hardest thing I think about the whole boot camp training was not the marching and not the drilling, but when we were on the rifle range, these drill instructors would sit right on your shoulders and get you down into what they call a sitting position, and you'd sit there for a half an hour and your legs would fall asleep. It's just a discipline routine showing that you just had to do what you were told and that was it. I would say that was probably the hardest thing.
Did you keep anything with you while you were in the war as like a good luck charm that you always took with you when you left, or anything that you still have today that you remember from the war?
You mean, did I take anything from where?
From when you were at the war, did you take anything home with you that you still have, or when you were fighting? Did you ever keep anything with you?
I've got a few mementos, but when we left the combat area, we were lucky to catch a flight, and we had to get rid of a lot of the things that we picked up, like Japanese swords and rifles and knives and flags and things like that. We just didn't have room to carry them back with us, and I'm kind of glad too, because we didn't want all that stuff to remember after a while.
Did you get to see firsthand combat?
Yes. Actually, we shouldn't have. Being in aviation, as ground crew troops, we're away from the front, but we were in an unusual position where we were. We were right up close to the front lines, and they used to lob grenade shells in on us. Every morning at 7 o'clock, it would wake you up. They'd pop into our camp, and we got quite a few casualties. Not many dead, but a lot of wounded, you know. But we weren't frontline troops, but we were sitting ducks, sitting there waiting for them.
What were some of the most memorable experiences during the war?
Well, you'll find that a lot of the veterans won't talk much about the war and what happened. They'll talk about the funny things, and that's what I like to remember. The fellas, the fun, and the camaraderie we had. I like to remember all the good times, more so than what happened, because everything is recorded in history, and you don't have to hear about it time and time again.
So what would you say one of your best experiences was?
Well, I think not so much an experience, but an occurrence to when I started getting rank and raising up in rank, and I reached the highest rank there was as an enlisted as senior NCO. You got certain comforts. You could talk to a general just as easy you could talk to a private when you were a six striper, and it was nice, you know. And you had the respect of your men. Although I was still a young fella, but there were so many people coming into service at the time that the ones that were in a little earlier start raising up in rank quite rapidly.
How'd you keep in contact with your family?
Well, World War II, unlike today, as you people know, with the media and the television, and all we had was letters. And some of our letters would take 3 weeks to a month to get home. And I remember sometimes we would get letters, maybe 20 or 30 at a time, and they were a month old. But we'd try to separate the dates and read them as they occurred, written back home. But it was strictly by the mail. There was no other way.
Do you ever remember where you went when you were on leave?
Were you awarded any medals of any kind?
Personally, no. Fortunately, I was never wounded. But we did get a presidential unit citation, that is, the squadron did. And we also were eligible for a special medal from the People's Republic of China because we helped destroy the Imperial Japanese 6th Army on Bougainville. And I don't know if you were aware of it, but the Imperial 6th Japanese Army was responsible for the rape of Nanking in 1937. So we helped destroy that army, and to the thanks of the People's Republic of China. But I never received the medal because that all happened after I was separated from the service, and I never followed up on it.
Do you recall any funny or humorous, like, memorable?
Yes, there's
times?
one story I tell. We had an old sergeant in our outfit that had a little bit of a drinking problem. Now, we never had much to drink. Alcohol was more or less tabooed with us. But he had a still out in the boondocks. And he would go out there and tap the still and get a little pixelated. And one night he came back in his Jeep and he ran up onto a tree trunk and woke us up with his shifting the gears, and he couldn't understand why he couldn't get the Jeep moving. Well, all four wheels were sitting up off the ground. And we had to push him off of there and get him to bed. But he was quite a character, and he was always good for a few laughs, so we enjoyed having him around.
Did you ever do anything like for good luck that you did?
Did you pull any kind of pranks on the other people?
What was that?
Did you pull any kind of pranks with your other friends or people that were with you in the army?
Plays, how do you mean that?
Just like joking around with them or set up a...
Oh, well, you know, there's that old story about short cheating, how you, I don't even remember how we did that anymore, but you'd make up a fella's cot and put the sheets halfway up so that he couldn't get his feet into, stuff like that. Not too much of that funny stuff went on. People would take a burn of you if you tried to play jokes on them, you know.
Did you feel any pressure or stress at the time when you were in training or during training?
I would say the stress was all in the boot camp days because you didn't know what was going to happen, where you were going to be sent, and I remember that our platoon in boot camp was the first outfit that went into Guadalcanal, and they were practically all wiped out to the man, and I didn't go along with them because I went to aviation school, which was a very good break for me. But no, I wouldn't say that there was much stress. You were too busy trying to do your job and just trying to stay alive and well, you know, a battle of self-survival.
How old did you say you were?
Pardon me?
How old were you?
I was 21 when I went in. You had to be 21 to enlist in the Corps. And there was no drafting of Marines in the Marine Corps at that time. It was all enlisted. And no women, incidentally. But when I came back from overseas, they had women in the Corps. In fact, I ran into trouble with a couple of them because I tried to order a few of them around at one particular time, and they didn't go much for that. So that was a lesson I had to learn.
The hard way.
Right.
How did it affect your life afterwards?
Well, I had gotten married in the service, and I had 1 year of college before I went into the service, and I had gotten married, and my wife was pregnant, and I just had to go to work. And fortunately, my family had a business, so I went into that line of work with them. And my life turned out a little differently than I thought it would. But all in all, things worked out well.
How did others treat you after the war? Like with a lot of respect or?
You mean after coming out of the service, you mean? How did people
Right,
treat you?
right.
Fine. I don't think there was much animosity toward veterans as there were for these later wars, you know, and it's just too bad that it's turned out that way. But things are so changed now with the service. It seemed like in World War II, just about every young person was in the service, but now it's we're at a war now, and people are just living their lives as though nothing else is happening, unless you have some loved one in the service itself.
What's your input on the war now?
Pardon me?
What's your input on the war now?
I think it's a tragic thing that we're involved in a war, but I wouldn't go out and protest. I'm behind the boys and the women 100%, and I'm behind the president 100%. I'm just sorry that this whole thing had to happen. But I suppose that in reality, it's something that was bound to come, and let's hope that it'll straighten out and prove to be worthwhile.
You said you got married while you were in the service. What were the weddings like?
Subdued. You got married. There was, as you know, there was food rationing, and we had a reception right at home. You couldn't travel around much by car because there was gas rationing. So it was close-knit and just mostly family. Maybe 30 or 40 people at most. But we got married. It was a good, legitimate marriage.
Did you have any family with you at the war?
Pardon me?
Was there any of your family fighting in the war also at the same time?
No. No.
Do you have any bad feelings or regrets about going into the war?
Do they have any regrets about going into the service? No. No regrets at all. No, I'm very proud to have served.
Do you have any like stories or anything? Like anything memorable?
Anything memorable?
Yeah.
I remember when we got back to the States, it was New Year's Eve of 1945, and we got a whole bunch of the boys, and we went to the U.S. Grant Hotel in San Diego, and we told the Maitre d' there to send any girls that were available into our little area. There just weren't a lot of girls around, but there was a whole bunch of women Marines there. They had just, apparently while we were overseas, they had started that. So we had them send a bunch of those gals in, and we had a hell of a time that night. Very, very good. Good New Year's Eve.
While you were in the service, what did you think about at night when you were getting ready to go to bed or laying in bed? What were your thoughts?
Well, I think most of the fellows thought about just putting their time in and getting home. But the strange part was, unlike today, you serve, they tell you you're going to serve so long. We never knew how long we were going to serve. Now, I served almost 2.5 years overseas, and I thought I'd never get home.
Besides situations like this, how often do you talk about your experiences?
Very, very seldom. In fact, I'm wearing this sweater. It's a prototype of my uniform. I could never get into my uniform because I put on 60 pounds since the last time I had it on. But I'm just happy to be able to wear this. It gives me a thrill to think that I can get into this sweater part. And but we never talk about the war with our family, and if we do ever mention anything about the war, it's always about the fun times and the jokes and the good camaraderie. Because I think people will read about the war and they'll read the gory parts. They don't have to get it from, you know, individual family members.
Do you still stay in touch with any of those people that you met in the service?
Yes, I kept in contact with most of my fellow Marines for, off and on for 55, 60 years. But unfortunately, I'm the last one alive out of my engineering squadron. They're all gone. I used to keep in touch with their wives too, and they're all gone. So it's kind of sad when I think back.
What was it like to finally go home?
Pardon me?
What was it like to finally go home?
Well, it was a big thrill to finally go home. I didn't know what to expect. Fortunately, as I say, my family had a business and I could go right into it, so I didn't have to worry about a livelihood. It was good to get home. Just good.
Do you or did you attend any reunions?
Yes. In 1967, I went out to California to attend a squadron reunion. I went out again in 1978, and I went out in 1982 for our 40th reunion. There's been a number of reunions of our squadron since then, but I haven't gone to any because, as I say, the numbers are so depleted that I didn't think it would hardly be worthwhile anymore.
So what business did your family own that you had a career after?
We were in a retail meat business, and I got into it, and I worked at that for 43 years. So I made a career of that. I was often sorry that I never went back to finish school, but I did wind up with 4 lovely children, and my wife, who's still alive and with me today. So all in all, I have no regrets.
Is there anything you would like to talk about that we haven't asked? Or
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
is there anything you would like to talk about that we haven't covered yet or asked?
You know, I have a terrible hearing problem. Not due to the war, just due to old age. I'm going to be 83 years old.
He said, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we didn't ask you about at all?
I made a few notes, but I don't think there's anything relevant here that no, I think you've covered things pretty good. I don't like to talk about things that happened while we were in combat because there's nothing heroic about that. Everybody in combat really is just trying to stay alive, to be very truthful with you. You do your duty and you don't know. They talk about heroes, but I don't think a hero knows that he's ever a hero while he's doing it. He's doing it to stay alive. And that's about what I have to say on that score.
You said you enlisted in the Marines. Why did you pick the Marines when you enlisted? What made you decide to go there instead of a different branch?
I picked the Marines basically because it was a small outfit. I figured that I'd have a better chance of advancing in it, which proved to be the case. Although at the time I didn't know, it was just a supposition. But I thought that it was peacetime when I enlisted, and I thought that I'd get to travel around, see different parts of the world. I did see different parts of the world, but courtesy of Uncle Sam mostly.
Do you remember the day the service ended?
Do I what?
Do you remember the day the service ended?
You mean when the war ended?
Yeah.
I most certainly do. I was up on it, my wife and I were up on a fishing trip up in Lake Arrowhead in California when the war ended. We didn't have a radio with us, and we didn't know the war ended until we got down into San Bernardino, and everybody was dancing in the streets. And then we knew the war was over. But it was quite a very joyous day, I remember. I think that we made fast tracks to the nearest watering hole, a gin mill if you have, and celebrated.
What's that you got there?
Oh, I just brought I thought I had a lot of pictures of the war and that, but I don't, because I remember that there was such strict censorship, unlike today, where you see the war going on and you see interviews through the media and television. The censorship was so strict, we couldn't even mention where we were. We couldn't mention what we were doing. All we could do was say, I love you, hope to see you soon. And it was the same repetitious letter that you wrote time and again, but you just kept in contact more or less just to see somebody's name on an envelope. So I have very few pictures of the war. I've got a few little things of my personal thing, but I don't think anybody would be interested in that. But as I say, the censorship was very strict. Every letter was censored, and if there was something that wasn't supposed to be in there, it was cut out. So we learned after a while not to try to mention anything or get away with any sneaky information, because we knew it wouldn't go through.
Has the war changed you to this day?
As to what?
Has the war changed the way you are to this day, still today?
No, I'm not a hawk. I'm not a dove. I'm someplace in between. As I mentioned before, I think this is a tragic war, but it's here, and I think we all have to stand behind our president and our troops and hope that it'll turn out in good fashion.
Oh, they're up there?
When I might want to add one little thing, and that is to say that war is not glamorous at all. It's a dirty business. So when the movies and that try to make war out as glamorous, that's all a fallacy.
When you watch these movies on TV, do you watch them or do you just...
I watch it occasionally. I try to keep up with what's going on. Some of it's so repetitious, you know, that you get a little bored with it. But I just feel sorry for those people over there in that weather, trying to, maintain their equilibrium going along. It's just a tough situation. But as I say, hopefully it'll turn out all right.
Did you keep a diary or journal?
No. I've got a few love letters at home in my trunk, but they're basically from my wife. But I didn't keep any diary. I've got a few papers that were printed up aboard ship and on the islands and stuff like that, but nothing that I kept myself. I wish I would have, but at the time you're going through this, you don't think about those kind of things.
Would you go back to the, would you ever be a paratrooper? Like, is that what you want to do or no?
So, if you could do this all over again, would you change anything or keep it the same?
If I could do it all over again, I think I'd do the same thing. When you're young, you feel you're indispensable and indestructible, and you feel that nothing can ever happen to you. So I would probably do the same thing again.
Oh yeah. Were there any like celebrations after?
No, I keep going away.
Celebration.
Like just that it was all over.
Yeah.
You mean when the war was
Right.
over? Not really. No, I wouldn't say because when the war was over, a lot of the fellas just opted to get out. I had so many points built up because of my overseas service, and I was in a little over 4.5 years, and we just went our ways. We went home, and that was it. The only celebrations that I can think of are reunions, but you just can't get to those every time you want. You know, they're years apart.
Would you like to be in charge? Yeah, is anyone else have any questions?
I think we
A
all
lot.
Thank
You
you.
think you've asked all the questions
Yeah.
now? I hope I gave you some insight.
Yeah, definitely. You did.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I just got a few pictures here you might be interested in. Here's what a Marine Corps wedding looks like.
The Army never paid me for any.
Do you remember like what things were going through your mind, like through the war, like if you were like,
Are we still on camera here? Oh my gosh.
Can you guys hold it up, please? We can.
We better say something very smart.
all the materials and that type of stuff. Back here that was
Write letters to yourself?
I've got one thing of interest in here that you might get a kick out of. Here's you can see that when you're in 100-degree heat on the equator, you don't worry much about what you look like or what your uniforms are like. You just do your job.
You guys get all your questions answered?
Yeah, we got a lot.
All right.
Yep.
I don't know how interesting I am, but this is a point of interest here. In Hawaii, you had to use special money. I don't think you've ever seen anything like this. You'll notice the American money is printed with Hawaii. When we left Hawaii, we had to turn all this money in because if you were captured, they knew where your base of operations was from. Then we have some Australian money here and some French Indo-Chinese money here. And
What was the best place to be stationed, do you think?
overseas, Hawaii.
Why? Yeah.
Hawaii. There was a lot going on there. I don't know if you ever heard of Artie Shaw, the band leader. Gene Krupa, you never heard of him? He was a drummer in Artie Shaw's band. See, in those days you had big bands, you know. They didn't have the rock and roll and all that kind of stuff. But we used to go down to Waikiki Beach and listen to all these bands, you know. These are just some pictures of us in the islands with our Jeep here. But there's one little item I wanted to show you. These are. I played ball with the Marine Corps baseball team for a while when I was in the States. And that was very good duty too. But there's one thing I wanted to show you in here. This is our 5-star hotel we stayed at on Midway Island. You probably heard of Midway. It was a turning point of the war when our fleet decimated the Japanese fleet for the Battle of Midway. We lived in underground bunkers then.
Is it your drawing?
Pardon?
Did you draw that?
I don't think I did. I think one of the boys in our outfit did that.
It said drawing.
This might be interesting. This is a Japanese paper that we captured on the island. This is the island of Bougainville. This is that little area. That's all that we had. That's where we lived, and the rest of this outfit was the Japanese Imperial 6th Army. But our fleet had the control of the seas, and the Japanese couldn't get any supplies, so they couldn't really do much outside of lobbing a few shells into us because they had no supplies. But we operated here out of that little area.
You guys ready for your group shot?
Yeah.
Do you want to wrap it up? Everybody's finished. We got to get group pictures. You got to want to get pictures of you and Mom too.
You better tell her to pretty up.
Okay, so you want to get their group shot?
I can't read that.